plus English, or on top of English and on top of French. By the way, I think that French is much easier than English, but this is just, let's say, my own experience. Of course, you can say the English is the relay language, and we will do everything by that. I think that those really successful do not rely on English only, full stop. The Latin, well, let's do away with Latin. I think it's a fascinating language which could also work as a relay to other languages. It's, first of all, an extremely logical language, which opens the doors to others, but I'm not here the advocate of the Latin. Where I am really an advocate, and I would like to join you in your battle, is about teaching finance and economics. I always get upset when my students, first of all, they don't read newspapers at all, let alone, and they are political scientists, they don't read foreign newspapers. I see them sitting on my benches reading the Kronenzeitung, which is really the worst thing they could do. But if I really get them to read the Financial Times, they stick to the first part, which generally is on politics rather than on the rest. Now, it is not so easy to understand. That is the problem. Financial implications of certain decisions need, let's say, at least basic knowledge of economics. And this is something I did not mention in my speech, but which is very important, and this again implies more resources, etc., and that is interdisciplinarity. I refrain from saying it because it's a big word, which needs a readjustment of curricula in a much more profound way than many things we have already said here. We do try that at my university in specific parts where the legal sciences have opened towards the economics. And I think that these new cohort of students that are coming out of those courses really know more and better about the interrelation of economics and legal and political science. Outweighing work experience academic grades. First of all, I have the experience that many of my students who have work experience are even better students. So I would never, let's say, contradict these two experiences, but trying to fuse them. But what you're asking is, how do we do that in practice in a curriculum? And here I would say the discussion is still open and not by far not concluded. But I take the point, it is a good point. Two more observations as to what has been said. Learning by comparison. You can only compare things which are different, because there is no need to compare things which are similar. Then you know already what the outcome is. When I talk about learning by comparison, what I have in mind is there might be better solutions in a different culture than your own. And you should not reinvent the wheel, but really try to learn from what has been already tried out in another culture. My last point relates to what our chairwoman has said about changing methods, practical experience. I absolutely agree with that. But where I would like to advocate classical university education is you need a moment of reflection on whether you can generalize the practical experience. Does this apply to all similar situations or not? Can you extrapolate from the point where you act to other and similar experiences. This is the famous moment of abstraction. And only for that, a scientific or science-related, research-related education is needed. Because if only the practical moment is important, then you can do away with universities, with any education. Huh? You need a moment where you can generalize. And if you allow me one last sentence on this global-local issue. Every activity is local and never global, of course. However, that is why I stress so much the word interdependence. You need to have a global perspective, and that is not so easy to gain, because even if in the end you act locally, we're all sitting here locally and talk to each other in a local context, you nevertheless have to have a perspective of what is going on out there in order to integrate it into your hands-on local experience. Not the world economy does not, and perhaps you who know this much better than I do, the global economy is not made up by multinational organizations, because 90% of the business activities come out of local companies. But the other ones open the world, and you have somehow to know how to compete with them. And therefore, I would never, I would advocate a dialectics of these two perspectives.
Yes, because I think we shouldn't neglect the question posed by one of the non-European students, and I think it's a very important issue. I'm not in a position to influence any decisions. I can only state my own opinion that, of course, if we encourage foreign students to come over and they happen to be coming from non-European nations, well, we should treat them equally, and they shouldn't be discriminated against. And it's apparently not the case right now. If you feel like you're treated differently than the European students and other regulations apply to you, well, if that's the case, then something should be done about this. Coming back to the question about why do we burden children with learning Latin? Do we really burden them? What I would advocate is introducing electives at secondary school level already, that actually students can choose. And of course, I can understand why they should rather learn Spanish, since it seems to be the second world language in Latin. But having said that, and with my background, both of my parents are classical philologists, and I can give you an example why we might need Latin if we choose to learn Latin. This is also a position I hold as a linguist. I was trying to explain in a syntax class to my Saudi students the concept of case. And it's crucial to understand syntax, and they can't relate to that somehow, because Latin, for instance, would be the way. But of course, I can understand why you shake your head. I mean, we should have the choice, but we should have the choice between Latin and finance and economics. Why not?
It's interesting because all four of you said, okay, you need to be able to practice the language, speak it, use it as something to interpret. You're never going to use Latin in anything.
But if you choose to become a linguist,
No, that's what I'm saying.
for instance,
You're wasting children's time.
but you assume that they all will become business people and they will go into economic studies.
I can run the Latin class at school. I speak 4 languages, okay? And Latin never helped me with one single language.
I disagree. As a linguist, I disagree. You might not even realize, because you don't realize the influence, but I think it's beyond scope of the discussion. I think it's beyond scope of the discussion. Can I just add one thing to this question of grades versus experience? I do agree with you that we should take experience into consideration as well. The question is when we're talking about international programs, and for instance you choosing to study abroad, or even me as a faculty member in Saudi Arabia, it's easier to compare transcripts of grades sometimes. And the things I had to justify for it is why I was a very good student, yet I never ever received an A+. It's just something that does not exist in any systems I've gone through, education systems, where the Saudis are very much used to A+. Now, and of course there is great inflation, for instance. Now, what do we do about this? So of course, something would need to be done in this respect as well, that we have other criteria than the grades on paper that tell us this is a good student. And it's not just about, prospects at the university, but also later on job prospects for you.
And also, for example, how when you want to go study in the USA, how they grade your grades there, because they don't really know how normally the studies are taken in Germany.
Different educational systems.
And then you go there to the international relations program and you learn entirely different things.
Yeah.
And I mean, how can you compare the grades?
That's why we have the credit transfer system now. Maybe you want to say something?
I really would like to add something here, because I think this is something extremely important, the comparability, because there's been so much talk about comparability and transferability. In reality, it has not yet really been well implemented. One transparency instrument that probably could facilitate that is the diploma supplement, if it's used properly. Because here, there should be a description of the qualification profile of that particular degree program. So far, it's not really being done. So enterprises or other universities cannot really read that. But increasingly so, if it's being really done properly, and say what exactly are the main skills and competencies that a particular person has when graduating. This will be accompanied by the transcript of records, as Zeugnis, but it will also describe the qualification in terms of learning outcomes at the degree program level, and also if you look, this is increasingly done so at the module or unit level. Unfortunately, this is really something I would like to, as you as a politician, to please support this process maybe. Unfortunately, Austria, I think, is the first country that has two qualification frameworks. Or at least that's supposedly going to happen as far as I've heard. Namely, a qualification framework, meaning the various levels of education relating to the higher, or to educational institutions, and on the other hand, vocational training. And whereas the European qualification framework only has 8 levels and relates both. So I think we should try to integrate both, and that way we could probably better integrate also work experience through recognition of prior learning, for example, or learning outside. To be honest, it's also not so easy because it's time consuming to find out. You have to sort of discuss this with the person, and it's not so easy to do. That's the other point.
One more question?
Okay.
Yes, I would just like to say 2 more things. First of all, distinguished panelists, thank you very much for your contribution here at the Clown Symposium. Second of all, I would like to answer your question. Asked if it's a good training to organize something practically in the university. So we have the practical side and the theoretical side, and you can practice it. You learn it in the morning and you practice it in the evening, or in between. I don't know. Evening sounds good, but yeah, I think that's a very good approach, and I would like to thank, especially at this point, Dr. Busek, who was encouraging me to, when I first talked to, about the idea of having this conference here, he was encouraging me a lot to do this, and I think it was a great learning process. And